and welcome to Narayana IAS. I'm Pratik, your faculty for Daily News Analysis. Now students, in today's session, we'll focus on the 5 most important topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. These 5 topics are very important from the exam's perspective. So make sure you hear the complete video so that you are well informed to address the questions asked in the UPSC examination. So let's have a quick brief about the topics that we shall be discussing in today's session. The first topic is taken from Indian Express page number 10. We know that the Supreme Court has granted bail to Arvind Kejriwal. But when the Supreme Court granted bail, the Supreme Court criticized heavily on the Central Bureau of Investigation for playing the partial role, for being biased, and how the CBI is betraying the trust of the common people of our country. So in this article, we'll try to understand the issues and challenges the CBI is facing and what CBI can do in order to restore the trust of the people on the Central Bureau of Investigation. The second article is taken from Indian Express page number 11. Now in this article, we'll understand about United Nations. Now, given that the global conflicts around the world and the natural disasters is affecting the people across the world, how important it is for the United Nations to be more efficient, and so reforms in the United Nations is a must. The third article is taken from Hindu page number 1. Now, in this article, we'll understand about the illegal migration problem in the Santhal Pargana region of Jharkhand. The fourth article we have taken from Hindu page number 13. Now, in this article, we'll understand the importance of Port Blair, which is the capital of Andaman and Nicobar Island. Why? Because the name of Port Blair has been changed and how Port Blair is linked to the Chola dynasty. The fifth article is taken from Hindu page number 13. Now, in this article, we'll understand the importance of helium gas in the rockets. These are the 5 topics that we have chosen for today's DNA session, right? And finally, we'll be discussing few practice questions so that you understand the type of UPSC questions or type of questions UPSC may ask in the examination. So students, let's get started. Students, the title of the first topic is Calling Out the Parrot. Now, who is a parrot? It's the CBI. So in this article, we'll try to understand about the body Central Bureau of Investigation. Now, this topic is important for both prelims as well as mains. And now, questions can be asked on CBI in the prelims about the functions, about the powers, about the selection process of the director of the CBI, as well as it is important from the mains perspective when it comes to the issues CBI is facing and what reforms can be done in order to reform the CBI. Now, let's go through a previous year question asked in the year 2021. The jurisdiction of the CBI regarding lodging an FIR and conducting probe within a particular state is being questioned by various states, which means states are not comfortable with respect to CBI investigating a case in the respective state. However, the power of the states to withhold consent to the CBI is not absolute. States have limited power with respect to jurisdiction, deciding the jurisdiction of the CBI. So, such type of questions can be asked in the mains examination, right? Now, what is the context? The CBI or the Supreme Court granted bail to the Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. But during the judgment, the Supreme Court criticized heavily the Central Bureau of Investigation. Why? Because the Supreme Court said that the CBI arrested Kejriwal without proper justification, which means without proper justification, Kejriwal had to be in the jail for months. If this is the case with high-profile person like Arvind Kejriwal, then what about the common people? And that's the reason the common people have to languish behind the jail for years. This is so unfortunate, isn't it so? Now, Justice Ujjal Bhuyan of the Supreme Court highlighted how the CBI is misusing the arrest power. Now, CBI has the power to arrest people. Here, the CBI is trying to misuse the powers it has. And that's the reason it is very important for the CBI to follow due process, fairness and the protection of personal liberty of the people. The Supreme Court also highlighted the systemic flaws or the problems in the criminal justice system of India. This is the context. So we'll try to understand the flaws in the criminal justice system. What is criminal justice system? About CBI, what exactly is CBI, the powers of CBI and the issues the CBI is facing, right? So make sure that you are listening or hearing the video completely so that you have complete information about the CBI. First, what is CBI? It is the premier investigative agency, which means it has a power to investigate corruption cases, economic offences and serious crimes of national and international relevance. We will discuss more about in the next slide. So, it is a premier investigative agency. It is a main investigation agency of our country. Corruption case, money laundering case, murder case, drug trafficking case. It is the premier investigative agency, which means whenever India faces any problem with respect to high profile murder case, rape case, CBI is the one who investigates the case. It is the premier investigative agency one. Second, it was established in the year 1963 following the merger of the Special Police Establishment with the CBI. And this merger happened under the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, which means the power the CBI enjoys is derived from the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. Very, very important for your prelims, which means the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act gives power to the CBI, or the CBI derives power from this particular act, right? Then about the jurisdiction. One, it falls under the Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pension. Very, very, very important. But then it requires the state government's consent. For example, let's say there's a murder in one particular state. So it requires the state government's permission before investigating a case in the particular state. For example, the rape case in the West Bengal. Now here the state government requested CBI to investigate the case, and that's the reason the CBI is investigating the case in the state of West Bengal. Had the state government denied the CBI the power, then the CBI cannot investigate or wouldn't investigate a case. Now as the state government allowed, so the CBI can investigate a case. We'll understand more about this state government's permission or consent to the CBI in the next slide. Then role in law enforcement. It is the nodal police agency coordinating with Interpol. Now what is Interpol? It is international police. For example, the crimes which are trans-state. Now drug trafficking, it happens from different countries or it happens between different countries, right? So whenever there's a trans-state crime, then CBI is the one who coordinates with the international police. I hope you understood what is CBI and how it coordinates with the international police, right? Then what is the motto or objective of CBI? Industry, impartiality and integrity. Unfortunately, they are not abiding by the principles as mentioned in the CBI's charter. Now, the CBI functions under various government acts and its investigative authorities derived from this particular act. This is what I explained in the previous slide. The power CBI enjoys is derived from the Delhi Special Police Act of 1946. And the most important point, it is neither a statutory body nor a constitutional body. Very, very important point for your prelim students. Make sure that you remember this fact for the rest of your life. Not only until you clear examination, but for the rest of your life. It is neither a statutory body nor a constitutional body. Now, UPSC has this tendency to ask such questions whether this body is a statutory body, constitutional body, executive body, non-statutory body. Let me tell you the difference. What is a statutory body? Statutory body is a body which is formed with the help of an act, legislation. For example, National Human Rights Commission is a statutory body, which means this commission was established via an act of parliament. What is a constitutional body? Constitutional body is a body which is mentioned in the constitution. For example, UPSC is a constitutional body as this commission was mentioned in the constitution. Non-statutory, and then third one we have is the executive body. For example, Planning Commission or Niti Aayog. These are the executive body, which means these bodies came into being without a legislation nor without the presence of that body in the constitution, which means the government on one day formed these bodies. I hope you understood the difference between statutory, constitutional and executive body. And CBI is neither a statutory nor a constitutional body. I hope you understood what CBI does and stands for. Now, these are the cases, as I told in the first slide, these are the types of cases CBI handles. Anti-corruption cases, bribery cases against the ministers of the government, against the public officials, senior IAS and IPS officers. It investigates corruption cases, 1. Second, economic offences like the money laundering, bank frauds, foreign exchange and smuggling. Third, special crimes like terrorism, bomb blasts, kidnappings. Fourth, suo motu case. Now, what is suo motu case? When the CBI takes the case without any complaint. So, the CBI takes the case when there is a FIR launched in the police station, or the CBI by its own, without any complaint made by any person or any body. When the CBI takes the case by its own, this is known as suo motu case. Interpol coordination, I just explained in the last slide, coordinates with the international police. And then cyber and high-tech crimes, that is the crimes related to sophisticated technology like artificial intelligence, or let's say the cyber crime. These are the types of cases handled by the CBI. The next, the composition of the CBI. 1. The CBI is headed by the director. Now, this director is the same person who is the Inspector IGP of the Delhi Special Police Establishment. So, the IGP of the Delhi Special Police Establishment is the director of the CBI. 1. Second, to assist the director, we have special directors and additional directors who handle various divisions under the CBI. For example, corruption division, right, etc. Then, to assist the special directors and additional directors, we have the joint directors and the deputy inspector general. Now, they coordinate between the senior officials and the ground officials. Alright, they coordinate between the senior officials and the ground officials. Then, the superintendents of police, that is the SPs, they manage the investigation on ground. They are the one who work on the ground and then report it to the joint directors and deputy IGPs. And then we have forensic, some technical officers like forensic officers and the law officers. And then CBI has also got other officers from the state government as well. Right? So, this is the composition of the CBI. Now, other officers does not include the police, the state police, right? So, CBI has its own man-force. Now, appointment process, this point is very, very important for your prelims. Very, very important. I think UPSC had also asked a question on the appointment and tenure of the director of CBI. The director of CBI is appointed by a committee in which there are 3 people, which means 3 people based company or committee appoints the director of CBI. High-powered committee consisting of 3 people. Who are these 3 people? Prime Minister, who is the chairperson, leader of opposition and the Chief Justice of India. Very, very important. Prime Minister, leader of opposition and the CGI. These are the 3 people based committee who appoints the director of CBI. Now, initially, the tenure of CBI director was only 2 years. However, this act, the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, was amended in the year 2021, which means now the total extension of the director of CBI can be extended up to 5 years. So, initially it was 2 years, now it can be further extended up to 5 years. Now, the extension beyond the initial 2 years, will be done based on public interest, right? Minimum 2 years is must. Now, the 2-year tenure is through the Central Vigilance Commission Act ensures that the CBI director's tenure is protected for the initial 2 years, which means once a person is appointed as a director, he will be in the office for 2 years. Which means that once a person is appointed as a director, no one can remove him. Which means this director can work independently. The director can be free from the political influence, right? So, security of tenure is very, very important. Now, most importantly, let us try to understand the challenges faced by the CBI. Why is it that the CBI is always criticized? 1. Political interference, which means that the government of the day, the central government, always uses CBI to target the political opponents. This was happening and still happening since many, many years. The government of the day always uses CBI as a tool to harass the political opponents. And that's the reason the Supreme Court had once stated that CBI acts like a caged parrot. Parrot is the CBI, right? Which means only when the government allows the CBI to do work, it does. Which means for all practical purpose or reasons, CBI is not neutral. CBI is not impartial. CBI is a biased organization, unfortunately. Though you cannot write this in the examination, right? You cannot say that CBI is a biased organization. You can never write such points in the examination. You can say that there is undue political interference on CBI. That is completely fine. You can also state that the Supreme Court had quoted once that CBI is a caged parrot. So, you can use such terms. 1. Second, bias allegations. It seems that the CBI works for the government, or CBI is biased against the political opponents, or as I told you, the government uses CBI to target the political opponents. And then delays in investigations. Now, the work of CBI is to investigate a crime. Now, CBI unnecessarily delays the investigation, as happened with Arvind Kejriwal. He was arrested since almost 9 to 10 months. They intentionally delay the investigation so that they can target the political opponents. And unfortunately, all the important officials of CBI, they work on the directions of the government, unfortunately. So, because of the delays in investigations, we do not know if the crime actually took place or it is the government who is trying to only target the political opponents. We do not know. Then shortage of resources. Now, despite CBI being such an important body, right, it is facing shortage of resources, which means there are no officials to work. There are very few officials. They do not have financial resources as well as infrastructure, which means because of this problem, it is limiting the ability of the CBI to work independently and impartially. Lack of accountability. Now, CBI is not brought under right to information. Right to information is a tool through which we can file RTI application in the court requesting more information about the government's work. So, you cannot file a RTI application in the court asking CBI to provide information about the investigation. That's the reason CBI is not transparent nor accountable. So, CBI should be accountable, right? And then the jurisdictional limits. Now, there are two types of consent. One is the general consent, and then specific consent. What is general consent? Which means if the CBI wants to investigate a case in any state, they are free to investigate a case in any state. But recently, 9 to 10 states of a country cancelled or refused general consent to CBI, which means they said that the CBI cannot investigate a case in our state. If the CBI wants to investigate a case in our state, they need to take our permission. And why did the states do so? Because of the way CBI was acting in a biased manner or partial manner. The way CBI was trying to target the political opponents. That's the reason the states withdrew the general consent given to the CBI. Right? So these are some of the challenges faced by the CBI. Now let us also try to understand the systemic flaws in the criminal justice system. Now what is criminal justice system? It is a system wherein the criminals are brought to justice. Right? So for example, a person has committed murder. Now this person should be punished, which means let's say a person A has murdered person B. Right? Now what is the guarantee that this person has murdered B? This person can also be framed. That's the reason a trial is important. Investigation is important. Alright. Now, criminal justice system, which means ensuring that the system effectively is in the position to dispense and deliver justice. But there are certain flaws. One, prolonged investigations. Now, investigation takes years on years. Right? The investigation does not get complete. It takes years to complete the investigation, because of which a person has to spend months and years in jail. For example, Arvind Kejriwal was in the jail for 10 months. Has the crime of Arvind Kejriwal been proved? I am not trying to defend any politician nor any political party. I am just trying to state the facts. I do not support or favor any political party. Let me make my position clear. But just for the case, Arvind Kejriwal's crime is yet to be proved in the court. Despite so, he has spent 10 months in jail. Same is the case with Manish Sisodia. His crime is yet to be proved, which means investigation is yet to be completed. But still, he has spent close to 2 years in jail. And then there are common people who spend years and years, like 5, 10, 15 years in jail. These are known as trials. People who are on trials. Prolonged investigation. This is what we refer to as prolonged investigation. Now, at times, the government intentionally tries to prolong the investigation so that they can use the political influence to influence the justice or influence the outcome of a case. This is a problem. Then, misuse of arrest power. Now, because of the procedure, the investigation body like CBI tries to misuse the structural flaw in the process and tries to harass the political opponents and arrest the people who belong to other political party. So when Congress was in power, they used to use CBI to target the political opposition. Now when the BJP is in power, they are trying to use CBI to target the political opposition. Second problem. Third, judicial delays in bail decisions. Now, the bail of Arvind Kejriwal was rejected by the trial court, by the High Court, and finally Supreme Court allowed the bail. What does it mean? It means that with respect to the bail decisions, the lower courts, the trial courts and high courts are refusing to give bail. See, the Supreme Court principle is that bail should be the norm. Bail should be the norm and jail should be an exception. Which means in most of the cases, bail should be given. Only as an exception, a person should be sent behind the prison. But here what's happening is that jail has become a norm. So this is actually going against the spirit of the Supreme Court principle. And weaponizing procedure, I just explained that how the government is using CBI as a weapon to harass the political opponents, right? And this actually is undermining the justice system's integrity. The role or objective or the principle of the courts of our country is to dispense justice as soon as possible. Now, because of the delays, it is undermining the integrity of our judicial system. Now, the Supreme Court judgments on CBI. One, in the Vinit Narayan versus Union of India. Now, this is something that you have to mention in your mains answer. So, make sure that you at least mention two judgments of the Supreme Court. The first is the Vinit Narayan versus Union of India. Here, the Supreme Court held that the appointment of the CBI director should be done through a high-powered committee. Initially, the government used to appoint the director, but now there is a high-powered committee of 3 people who appoints the CBI director 1. Second, in the Subramanian Swamy versus Director of CBI or Director CBI, the Supreme Court struck down Section 6A of the DSP Act. Now, this Section 6A of the Act allowed the central government to give permission to the CBI to investigate corruption cases against the senior civil servants, which means before 2014, if the CBI has to investigate a corruption case against senior government officials, then they have to take permission from the central government. But now, the CBI can proceed without obtaining permission from the central government. But practically, the CBI has to take the permission from the CBI or from the central government. The next is Common Cause versus Union of India 2018. Here, the Supreme Court upheld Section 4A of the Act, reinforcing the selection process for the CBI director, which means here the Supreme Court upheld Section 4A, stating that there has to be high-powered committee which should appoint the director of the CBI. High-powered committee comprises of 3 people. One, the Prime Minister, who acts as a chairperson. The second is leader of opposition. The third one is CJI. Please remember this point for your prelims. Now, what are the ways through which CBI can be reformed? First, statutory backing. We discussed that CBI is neither a statutory nor a constitutional body, and that's the reason a new CBI Act should replace the DSP Act, which means CBI should have a clear legal mandate, autonomy and accountability. One, all these points is very important to write in the mains answer. Second, increasing resources. CBI should have adequate manpower, financial resources, infrastructure, so that they can do their work more efficiently and effectively. Third, reducing political interference. Now, CBI should adhere to the principle of CBI. It should act as an independent and impartial body. It should de-link itself from the political bracket or political class, right? And that's the reason greater independence for the CBI is very, very important. Amend jurisdiction laws. The CBI's jurisdiction should be extended beyond the union territories, which means CBI should have the power to investigate the case in any part of our country. But for that, it is very important that the CBI has to undergo reforms, change the impression, change the face of CBI, so that people should have the trust in CBI. As of now, people feel that CBI act as per the central government's direction, which is largely true. So, CBI has to change this impression, and only then people will trust CBI. Reforms in the appointment process. Again, the selection process should always remain transparent, and there should be no undue extension except in exceptional cases, which means the tenure should be 2 years and it should be extended only in exceptional cases. And then there has to be accountability of the CBI, for which the CBI should be brought under right to information, which means people should know the functioning of CBI. People should know why the CBI is taking so much time to investigate a case. Right? So, this is all about the Central Bureau of Investigation. I hope students I have covered each and every point. Now, when a question comes in the UPSC examination about CBI, I'm pretty sure if you have heard this topic I'm pretty sure you'll be in a position to address each and every type of question asked in the examination about CBI. Make sure that you write down the points, you jot down the points and revise and make sure that you're thorough about CBI. Right, students? Students, the title of the next topic is The United Nations the World Needs. So, in this article, we'll try to understand about the international body, United Nations, the challenges it is facing or going through, and what can be done to make the functioning of United Nations more effective and more efficient, right? So, you can map this topic under GS paper 2, important international institutions and their mandate. A PYQ, discuss the impediments, that is hurdles, India is facing in its pursuit of a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. So, we'll try to address the answer to this question in the explanation. What is the context? Now, there's so many global crises happening around the world. We have the Israel-Hamas war, Russia-Ukraine war, civil war in the African continent, African region, right? But somehow the United Nations is not able to address these challenges, which means the United Nations as of now has become an ineffective body. Why? Because it is failing to address the global challenges. Now, what is United Nations? It is the government of the entire world. We have the governments for every country. So, for each and every country, we have a common government known by the name United Nations. The author tries to argue that United Nations is a body that is shaped by the Western countries' mindset, which means somehow the Western countries do not want to lose their influence in the United Nations. And given that the summit of United Nations is about to take place, the author of the article tries to suggest that the other developing countries should try to push reforms in the United Nations. An emerging country like India should lead the role to ensure that reforms are undertaken in the United Nations. What is United Nations? It was founded in the year 1945, that is after the end of Second World War. The purpose was to prevent any major world wars. What is the objective? To promote peace, security and international cooperation among all the countries. Initially, the United Nations started with 51 countries. 51 countries were members of United Nations, but now it has 193 countries, which means it represents almost all the nations. Next, the objective is to maintain international peace. There should be peace throughout the world, and the United Nations tries to develop what? Friendly relations among the nations. How? By promoting human rights and encouraging social and economic development, which means overall development of the people of the world. Now, United Nations has 6 principal organs. Very, very important to remember. 1, the United Nations General Assembly. It's like the Parliament. 2nd, United Nations Security Council. It is the most important and powerful body of the United Nations. 3rd is the Economic and Social Council. 3rd, 4th is the International Court of Justice, and 5th is the Secretariat. The 6th one has been abolished now, the Trusteeship Council. So now it has 5 principal or 5 most important organs of the United Nations: General Assembly, Security Council, then Economic and Social Council, International Court of Justice, and the last is the Secretariat. These are the 5 most important organs of the United Nations. Now, as I told you, Security Council, it's like Cabinet Secretariat, right? The Cabinet Secretariat is the most powerful body in our country, right? Why? Because it has a power to take decisions. Same with respect to United Nations, it is the Security Council, which is the most powerful body in the United Nations. Why? Because it has a power to take important decisions. Important decisions like to start a war, to attack a country. It has that It has got that power. It has 15 members. Now, out of 15 members, 5 are permanent members. They will always be a part of United Nations Security Council, and 10 are non-permanent members. So, if you get a question asking the number of members in UNSC, it is 15 and not 5. And who are these 5 permanent countries? US, UK, France, Russia and China. The objective of UNSC is to address threats to global peace and security. Their main objective is to ensure there is peace throughout the world. And then the agencies of the United Nations like the World Health Organization, UNESCO, UNICEF and programs like the United Nations Development Program, the Food Program, right? These programs and agencies, the objective is to address the global challenges like health, education, development and humanitarian crisis. Which means, in short, United Nations is a body responsible for addressing all the major challenges that the world is facing, be it terrorism, be it the hunger crisis, be it the humanitarian disasters, etc. Right? Now, let us try to discuss the challenges and issues of the United Nations. First is the outdated structure and imbalance of power, which means as of now, the structure of United Nations is outdated. Why? Because there have been no reforms in the United Nations since 1945. So, I am asking a question. Is the global situation the same as it was in the year 1945? No. Which means the United Nations should have changed as per the changing world. But unfortunately, it has not changed. The current structure reflects the global realities of the 20th century. But now the situation has changed. So, United Nations should reform or change, but unfortunately, it is not to be the case. So, then imbalance of power. For example, countries like India, Brazil and those from Africa and Latin America, they remain underrepresented. Now, despite the fact that the other countries like Brazil, India, countries from Africa and Latin America are growing in power, but they do not have a say in taking major decisions in the United Nations. First problem. Second is the global power shifts and resurgent nationalism. Now, you see that the world order is changing. Why? One, because of nationalism, because of protectionism, and then the resurgence of the interstate wars. We have the Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, right? And then there are also conflicts in the African continent. But somehow, because of the changing global power shifts, the United Nations should actually address the power shift or the changing world order by addressing or by mediating effectively. But the United Nations has lost the ability to intervene decisively. Why? Because there are internal divisions in the United Nations. For example, as I told you, the 5 countries are the most powerful countries in the world or the United Nations. These are the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. For example, let's say the world decides to attack Iran, right? But now here, Russia uses her veto power to obstruct the resolution in the United Nations. So, for example, let's say if the world decides to attack, let's say Iran, which means all the 5 countries in the United Nations Security Council should be in agreement with it. If any country is not okay with the world attacking Iran, the world cannot proceed with attacking Iran. That's how the veto power of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council is. I hope you are getting my point. And because of the divisions between, let's say, there are 5 countries as I told you, US, France, Russia, UK and China. So we see that there's a divide between the West and the East, right? Russia does not have a good relation with these Western countries. Same is the case with China. So whenever these countries initiate a resolution, these countries block it. And whenever these countries initiate a resolution, these countries block it. Because of the internal divisions, the United Nations is unable to intervene effectively. This is the problem, second problem. The third is peacekeeping and conflict resolution. What is peacekeeping? Which means United Nations has got its own army, known by the name United Nations Peacekeeping Body or Mission. Now, whenever United Nations is supposed to act to end a war, let's say Israel-Hamas, or let's say Russia-Ukraine. Now, United Nations is supposed to send her troops to stop the ongoing conflict. But unfortunately, the United Nations peacekeeping, which is the army of United Nations, is unable to do so. Why? Because they do not have resources. There is lack of consensus. If one country says yes, the other country is opposing it. There are political disagreements. And that's the reason the United Nations is not able to mediate effectively. Next is humanitarian crisis and climate change. Now, whenever there are global conflicts, United Nations is supposed to act or supposed to provide humanitarian needs like food, shelter, temporary shelter. But unfortunately, because of the logistical challenges, no funds and the geopolitical tensions, United Nations is unable to provide humanitarian help to the people who are suffering. Again, the challenges. At the same time, the United Nations efforts to address climate change is also affected because of the internal divisions. For example, when Donald Trump was the president of the United States of America, he withdrew from the Paris Agreement. Now, Paris Agreement is a global agreement. So again, because of the internal division and conflict, the United Nations is not able to act effectively and efficiently, because of which the people are suffering. Economic and development paralysis. Now, the United Nations development goals, including the sustainable development goals, which are 19 in number, they are facing problems, which means United Nations, like every government, has a goal of development. Similarly, United Nations has a goal of developing the entire world, but because United Nations is facing obstacles or challenges. Why? Because of poverty, inequality and slow economic growth in many regions. For example, let's say Africa, Latin America, Middle East. These are some of the challenges and issues the United Nations as a world body is facing. Now, let me also help you with India's role in United Nations reforms. Now, India has advocated or supported her role, or India wants a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. As I told, there are 5 permanent members. So, why is India claiming a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council? One, because India is the world's largest democracy. India is emerging as a global power. Then India has contributed heavily in the United Nations peacekeeping mission, which means of all the peacekeeping missions of the United Nations, India has contributed her troops to the United Nations peacekeeping missions. So, whenever, for example, the Korean War, right, or let's say the war in the African continent, India has always contributed her troops in the United Nations peacekeeping mission. And that's the reason India feels that India deserves a place in the permanent seat or United Nations Security Council permanent seat. Then India has always championed the needs of Global South. Now, Global South represents the poor countries. Global North represents the rich countries. Global South, poor countries. Now, India has always championed the cause of Global South. India has always represented or ensured that the needs of the poor countries or developing countries is put forth before the United Nations. For example, India was a leader of non-alignment movement, right? So here you see that India has always tried to address the needs of the developing and poor countries. India also feels that there has to be financial contribution, and financial contribution should be made more by the Western countries, or there has to be fair financial contribution and more representation from different parts of the world in the United Nations Security Council. Now, does it mean that as United Nations is facing so many challenges, does it mean that United Nations should be abolished? No. We need United Nations more than ever. So let us try to understand the relevance of United Nations in the 21st century. The first is to address the global crisis like the climate change, pandemics and economic inequality. So if United Nations is to be abolished, which body is going to address the global crisis? So we do not have any answer to it. And that's the reason it is important to reform the United Nations rather than complete abolishing it. Which means United Nations is the only platform where the countries can cooperate, negotiate to find a solution to the global crisis. Second is the humanitarian assistance and development. Now, because of the global conflicts happening around the world, which body is responsible for providing humanitarian need? It is only United Nations that can provide humanitarian assistance, especially whenever any part of the world is affected because of natural disasters, global conflict and other crises. So, United Nations is the only body which can mobilize resources from different countries and coordinate the global relief efforts. Global diplomacy and conflict mediation. No matter, United Nations has many shortcomings. Despite the fact so, United Nations is the only body or only responsible body where dialogue can be held. Diplomatic dialogue can be held and the conflicts can be mediated. And that's the reason it is very important that United Nations has to be reformed. For example, the United Nations Charter. Charter, it is the Constitution of United Nations. It provides a framework for international law and justice, which means the Constitution of United Nations provides a framework where the conflicts can be resolved peacefully. And that's the reason we need United Nations more than ever. So, how can the United Nations be reformed? First, it is very important to foster consensus among the countries, right? So, it is very important that the United Nations should address the needs of each and every part or every continent of the world. For example, there has to be representation from the regions like Latin America, African continent. So, if you talk about the United Nations Security Council or the permanent members, now there is no country from Africa, there is no country from Latin America, right? Europe is only represented and Asia is underrepresented, which means in order to facilitate inclusive dialogue, countries from other regions should also be made a part of the United Nations. Second, we have to change the United Nations Charter, which means we have to change the Constitution of United Nations to have the representation of different countries. And for that, to change the United Nations Charter, we need 2/3 majority in the General Assembly. Now, General Assembly is an assembly of 193 countries and ratification of all the P5 members. Let's say, for example, India should be made a permanent member of United Nations Security Council, for which 2/3 majority is required in the General Assembly and all the 5 countries should agree to India's inclusion. Now, do you think China will allow or China will agree India to be a part of UNSC? This is a problem, right? Third, addressing veto power. Now, these P5 countries are actually misusing their veto power. This veto power was given to these 5 countries to make the world peaceful, which means these 5 countries have the responsibility to ensure that no conflict should take place. But these countries are misusing their veto power, and that's the reason their veto power should be limited or veto power should be completely abolished. This is the third point. And then it is very important to ensure that the working or functioning of the United Nations is transparent and they are held accountable, for which the bureaucracy or the officials need to be more accountable. The officials have to be more accountable, right? And then strengthening financial stability. As of now, the United Nations is lacking the resources. So the countries have to come together to address the financial problems of the United Nations, which means there has to be, or the financial or the contribution to the United Nations, this system has to be changed, has to be made more fair, which means financial reforms should aim to eliminate the errors and improve the fiscal management of the United Nations. Which means that in the 21st century, we need United Nations more than ever, right? And that's the reason it is very important for the United Nations to undergo reforms and reflect the current realities. Only then United Nations will act or will be a key player in the global governance and people will trust the United Nations. I hope you understood each and every dimension of the second chapter, that is United Nations and reforms, right? Students, the title of the next topic is Infiltration has taken place in Santhal Pargana, right? So we'll understand about the illegal migration in the region, and this topic is important from the internal security perspective, right? GS paper 3. So a question was asked in the year 2014. How does illegal trans-border migration pose a threat to India's security? Discuss these strategies to curb this, bringing out the factors which give impetus to such migration. So this question is about the illegal migration issue that our country is grappling with since many years, since independence, right? So what is the context? Here, the union government has acknowledged that there is illegal migration issue in the Jharkhand's Santhal Pargana region. Because of the illegal migration happening in this region, the demography of the region is changing, which means the indigenous people of the region are being outnumbered by the illegal migrants. This is the context, which means the illegal migrants or their population is increasing in the region, because of which the population of the local tribal population is declining. What is the issue? A PIL was filed in the year 2022 alleged that the illegal migrants from Bangladesh are settling in the Santhal Pargana region, and because of which there has been demographic changes, which means the population of scheduled tribes is declining. For example, in 1958, the population of the ST in the region was 45%, which has been dropped to 28% in the year 2011. And what are the reasons for population decline? Migration is not only the reason, it is one of the major reasons. But other than migration, we have low birth rates among tribals as well as religious conversions, because of which we see a decline in the population of the scheduled tribes. Now, let's try to understand the illegal migration problem along the India and our neighboring countries' border. Now, first of all, we need to understand why does migration take place so easily. One, because of the border being porous, which means it is easy to enter India. Simple. Now, illegal migration, which means when people are entering our country without any documents. Let's say, for example, people in Bangladesh are facing economic problems, like they do not have a job, or the Hindus in Bangladesh are facing religious persecution, or the Rohingyas in Myanmar are facing religious persecution. Now, in order to make their lives better or save their life, they enter India. Why? Because India, politically and security wise, is a very stable and safe country. One. Second, the migration takes place through clandestine, that is hidden routes. For example, the people who want to enter India, they do not enter through borders. Why? Because there are the border security forces who are actually manning the border. So what they do is, they take the help of rivers and mountains through which they sneak in our country. Now, the major migration happens from the countries like Bangladesh, Nepal and Myanmar. Right? Apart from this, there have been migrations from Sri Lanka and Afghanistan as well. But the major migration happens from Bangladesh, Nepal and Myanmar. Right? And why do people flee their country? See, it's very easy to blame the people who are migrating in our country. Are these people migrating in our country out of their own wish? No, not at all. And that's the reason, to understand, I say this in my class every time, that in order to understand the illegal migration problem, we need to have a human touch. Right? So when the people flee their countries, they are not doing out of their own wish. No, they are forced to flee. Let's say, for example, let's wish that the situation should never turn worse in our country, but let's say if the situation turns worse. Or let me just tell you the practical reality or the reality of a country. Why do people of a country who have money, like the middle class people or the rich class people, why do they settle abroad? Why is it that they go to abroad or the Western countries to seek education? Why is it so? Aren't there good institutions in our country? There are good institutions in our country, which means for better lifestyle, for better economic opportunities, people travel to Western countries. So here, similarly, because of the problems in their country, like the economic opportunities, political instability, religious persecution and ethnic proximity, like for example, along the India-Myanmar border, there are many tribes who share the same ethnicity. So because of these factors, people migrate to our country. Right? These are poor people. That's the reason they are forced to migrate. Right? And now the people who criticize the illegal migrants, they say that because of these illegal migrants, this is putting a pressure on the public services, which means the resources that our country has is already less. And in this very less resources, there are more number of people who are fighting for this very less resources. Right? That's the reason they criticize this illegal migrants. Let me also help you with this. Now, if you're discussing the Santhal Pargana, it is important to also discuss the Santhal rebellion. So just to help you to revise the problem or the Santhal rebellion, about the Santhal rebellion. Now, in the year 1855, Santhal Hul is a rebellion. It was a major tribal uprising against the British rule. It was led by these people. Right? Now, who are Santhals? They are an indigenous community who were settled in the Santhal Pargana region by the British in 1832. So, when the British made these Santhals reside in the Santhal Pargana region, they promised them land and livelihood. But unfortunately, these Santhals, who are one of the tribes of our country, they face exploitation from the British officials, from the zamindars, from the moneylenders. So these moneylenders, they took away their lands and made them a bonded labor. So in the year 1855, these Santhals rebelled not only against the British officials, but also against the zamindars and moneylenders. So this revolt actually became a symbol of local resistance against the mighty British force. Unfortunately, it was suppressed, the rebellion was suppressed by the British officials, but it became a symbol of resistance against the mighty British officials. But to make the situation better, the British, they passed the Santhal Parganas Tenancy Act in the year 1876 to provide more protection for the lands of the tribals. However, it was not that effective. So you should also know about the Santhal rebellion, right? I hope you understood the article. Since the title of the next topic is Port Blair to be renamed Sri Vijayapuram, right? So in this, let's try to understand about Port Blair. We'll understand what is Kalapani and how Port Blair is linked to the Chola dynasty. And you can map this under GS paper. It should be 1, Arts and Culture, right? Can also be asked for prelims. See, a question was asked in the year 13 on the Chola architecture, right? And that's the reason such topic becomes important for the UPSC examination. What is the context? Port Blair. What is Port Blair? It is the capital of Andaman and Nicobar Island, has been renamed as Sri Vijayapuram. Who has renamed it? Not required, or it's not important to know who has renamed it, right? So the purpose why this name was renamed is to get rid of the colonial baggage, right? Why? Because Port Blair, or this name, was given by the colonial masters of our country. This name, Port Blair, was named after Archibald Blair. Who was he? He was a naval surveyor and lieutenant in the Bombay Marine. He conducted the first thorough survey of the Andaman Islands. Now, the East India Company used this island for strategic purpose, that is to keep a watch on the enemies. Also, they used this island as a penal colony, which means the people the British used to punish in the Indian mainland, these people were sent to this Port Blair as a form of punishment. For example, I hope you all know that how Veer Damodar Savarkar was sent to Kalapani, right, or a cellular jail where he had spent many years, right. So this Kalapani is located in the Andaman and Nicobar Island. It had become a house for the political prisoners and the freedom fighters, right. Now, what is the historical connection with the Chola dynasty? 1. The Andaman Islands were used by the Chola Empire Rajendra I in the 11th century, right, to attack Sri Vijaya. Now, Sri Vijaya, back then it was known by the name Indonesia. The Cholas referred to this island as Manakavaram, right. Then, the Chola invasion of Indonesia, or Sri Vijaya as it was known earlier, is seen as part of Chola expansionism. Why? 1. Either to obstruct trade or expand the influence of the Chola Empire. Now, the Chola dynasty can be broadly categorized as 1. The early Cholas, and the other one is the imperial Cholas. Talking of the early dynasty, the early Cholas were a local power in the Tamil region of southern India. They ruled during the Sangam age and were known for their influence in the region before expanding their empire significantly, right. The founder of the Chola Empire in the medieval period was known by the name Vijayala Chola I, who re-established Chola power in the 9th century. But then the Chola Empire reached its zenith, highest stage, under the rule of Raja Chola I and his son Rajendra Chola I. So all these points are very, very important. These are all factual in nature. So all these points are important for your prelims examination, right? Now, Rajendra Chola I, he expanded the empire significantly, consolidated the Chola rule over South Indian parts of Sri Lanka. He also initiated large-scale temple construction, including the Brihadeshwar temple in the Thanjavur region. Then, talking about Rajendra Chola I, he was known for his military campaigns and expansionist policies. He extended the empire's influence to Southeast Asia, including regions of the present day like Indonesia and Malaysia. His famous campaign included the invasion of Sri Vijaya. However, post the decline or post the death of Rajendra Chola I, the Chola Empire began to shrink, right. So, these are the factual information about the Chola Empire, which is important for the UPSC examination. I hope you have understood the article, right. Students, the title of the next topic is why is helium and why it is used in rockets, right. So, let's try to understand about the helium gas. Why? Because UPSC may ask a question on such type of topics, right? So you can map this under GS paper 3, Science and Technology. PYQ. Now the question was asked on the terms pyrolysis and plasma gasification. So whenever we come across such terms, make sure that you have sufficient information about such technical terms, because UPSC always has this tendency to ask questions on the topics that have been recurring in the newspaper, right? Now let us discuss why helium gas is important and why it is in the news. We know that the NASA astronauts who are aboard the Boeing Starliner spacecraft, they are facing a delay in returning to the Earth. Why? Because of a helium gas leak in their spacecraft. So because of the helium gas leak, their return is getting delayed, right? What is helium? It is a noble gas. It is the second lightest element. The first lightest or the lightest element is hydrogen in the universe with the atomic number 2. Is a type of chemical element which belongs to group 18, formerly known as group 0 of the periodic table, right? So very, very important. This is a factual information. Now, noble gas are characterized by their lack of chemical reactivity, which means helium gas does not react with any other gas. That's the reason it becomes very, very important to be used in the spacecraft missions. So very important point for your prelims examination, it does not react. Now, helium is one such gas which is one of the most abundant elements found in the cosmos, but it is a rare element which is found in Earth. On Earth, it is a rare element, but in cosmos, it is found in abundance. Very important point for your prelims again. So such type of questions UPSC will ask, right? So these are the things that you're supposed to know about the helium gas. Now, the helium plays a vital role in the functioning of rockets. Why? First is the pressurization. Now, helium, as I told you, has got atomic number 2. It is much lighter than air. Very, very important. And as it is lighter than air, it has specific advantages, like during a rocket's flight, as fuel and oxidizer are consumed. Let's say, for example, there is a fuel tank. Now, it is very important to maintain pressure in the fuel tank. So, whenever the fuel is consumed, the gap that remains in the fuel tank, that gap has to be plugged in. And to plug in the gap, helium gas is very, very, very important to maintain the fuel so that the rocket remains operational in the space. Right? Steady fuel flow to the engines, because if the fuel flow is inefficient, it will abort the space mission. Helium is non-reactive, as I told you, it does not react with other chemicals, making it safe to interact with fuel. Why? Because there is no risk of combustion or contamination. Right? That's the reason helium gas is used. Very, very important point for your prelims examination. Now, the helium's extremely low boiling point of minus 270 degrees Celsius. This is the low boiling point of helium gas. Now, this allows it to remain gas in a very cold condition. That's the reason helium gas is used in these space missions. Now, what is this cryogenic? It refers to the signs of extremely low temperature, typically below minus 150 degrees Celsius. Now, in the space and rocket science, it involves storing and handling cryogenic fuels like liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, which must be kept at ultra cold temperatures to stay liquid. So, a UPSC might ask a question. Cryogenic application, or the term cryogenic, refers to which of the following options? 4 options. So, it is a science of maintaining extremely low temperature so that the gas can be kept in the liquid form. Now, why is helium prone to leaks? Why? Because it has a small atomic number. So, if there is a gap, or because of certain gap or mismatch, it leads into helium leak. Even the smallest gaps, as I told you, imperfections or faulty seals in the storage tank or fuel system can allow helium atoms to escape. This is the reason why the mission, or they are not able to return on time on Earth, the spacecraft, right? So I hope you understood the article, right? Students, it's time to discuss few questions now. In order to understand if you have understood all the topics, it is important to go through these questions. Let us start with the first question. As per the Lokpal and Lok Ayukta Act 13, which of the following is not a member of a committee responsible for appointing the director? 3 people powered committee, high powered committee, Prime Minister, CGI, leader of opposition. Yes, 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 wrong. Not a member, D option, very simple one. In the context of the article that we have discussed, it might be easy for you to remember these facts, but when you have so much to learn and remember, then especially in the UPSC prelims, such questions might confuse you. So be very, very thorough with such important facts. Next, why is helium classified as noble gas? It is abundant in the Earth's atmosphere? No. It is highly reactive? No. It belongs to group 18 and is chemically inert? Yes. This is what we discussed. Option C is the correct answer for question number 2. Which of the following statements correctly explains the use of helium in rocket operations? 1. It is used for pressurizing rocket fuel tanks because it maintains steady pressure as fuel is consumed during. Yes, this is correct. Makes it a safe gas, inert nature, that is, it does not react to interact with rocket fuels without the risk of combustion or contamination. Yes, this one is also correct. It is preferred in cryogenic applications due to its ability to remain a gas at extremely low temperature. Yes, this one is also correct. Helium is reactive. No, this is not reactive. So 1, 2, 3, option B has to be the correct answer for question number 3. Next question. Which of the following statements are correct regarding the historical and colonial significance of Port Blair? Port Blair was named after the British naval surveyor and lieutenant. Yes, this is correct. It was used by the Chola Empire Rajendra I in the 11th century as a base for attacking the Srivijaya Empire is the Indonesia. Yeah, this one is also correct. So both 1 and C, 1 and 2, option C is the correct answer. Now, which of the following countries in decreasing order of the length of the land border they share with India? Which means decreasing order, which means highest to lowest. So again, we know that Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Myanmar. So if you observe Indian map, right, it seems that Bangladesh is the country with whom we share the largest border, followed by China, followed by Pakistan, followed by Nepal, followed by Myanmar. Then we have Bhutan. So which means Bangladesh, it seems C is the correct answer for question number 5, right? Now, mains practice question, discuss the relevance of the UN in 21st century in light of global challenges and analyze the key reforms required for its effective functioning. Which means in the introduction, you have to start with the information about United Nations. Like United Nations was a body established in the year 1945 to prevent the occurrence of world wars, and the objective was to promote international peace and cooperation, right? But given the global challenges that the world is grappling with, it is important to reform the United Nations. This is what you can mention in the introduction. Then in the body, you can mention the relevance, why it is important for the UN, or why is UN relevant in the 21st century. So either you can first mention the problems or issues in the United Nations, followed by relevance and the solution, or even this one is fine. So if you talk about the challenges, outdated structure, it reflects the global realities of the 20th century, Security Council, misuse of veto power, imbalance of power, Africa, Latin America, Asia is underrepresented, inefficiency, the bureaucracy is very slow, it is not transparent, humanitarian crisis, there are no funds to respond to the humanitarian crisis, geopolitical tensions, let's say Israel-Hamas war, US is favoring Israel, and let's say other countries are favoring Hamas, etc. Then you can mention about the relevance. Now, because of these issues, UN is more relevant to address global conflicts like Ukraine-Gaza war, peacekeeping missions, sustainable development, climate change, response, and global diplomacy, right? Then the solution, you have to mention that in order to make United Nations relevant, and efficient, it is important that the Security Council should be expanded by including countries like Brazil, Japan, or let's say India. Veto power reform, either you should limit veto power or completely abolish it. Global South should be represented more in the United Nations decision making. Financial stability so that United Nations is in a position to help during the humanitarian crisis, right? So, to make United Nations more and more relevant, it is important that reform should be undertaken as soon as possible. This is how you conclude the answer. I hope, students, you have understood each and every topic and the basis of which you are in a position to answer all these questions. Students, please support our initiative by liking, sharing and subscribing to Narayana IAS. Please spread the word because we take a lot of efforts to simplify the topic so that you understand each and every topic, right? So please support our initiative by hitting the like, subscribe option, right? Thank you so much.